Well, hello, friends. This is Connie Hubbard, and today I would like to show you my Mobius cast on. I learned it from Cat Bordhi, and I can link the video to that. I've made many Mobius scarves over the years and learned a few tricks and tips that I can share as well. I have a double circular needle that you can use. It's 100 centimeters long or 39 inches in length. It's important. You have to have the right length of the knitting needles, and the needle's size is a 5 or 8. It depends on the thickness of the yarn, but this works for me, I guess. So it's a short tail cast on. So I'm going to use one side of my knitting needle to make a slip knot. And I leave a tail about this long. And now I take the slip knot into the middle of the needle, pulling it tight. Then I take the opposite knitting needle, so that it's a circle. Can you see that here? So it's a loop. And with this, I go into the slip knot, and I want the slip knot to be as tight as possible. And I'll explain later why. But, well, or I can say even now, you don't want a hole in the middle of your scarf. So hold this with your fingers. And now you go under the cord, reach for the yarn and pull it up. And now make sure that you hold this really tight. This needs to be tight and close together so it doesn't create a hole. So that's the first step. Then we go and put the yarn over the needle and repeat this until we count. I usually do 30, depending on the thickness of the yarn, between 28 and 32. And it's hard to say stitches because one stitch consists of this step. This I count as one, okay? So there's one on my needle. So I'm going to do it slowly. 2, 3, under, yarn, over, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, always holding this with my fingers so it doesn't slip away. Under, yarn, yarn over, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, I'll move some of this over. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. We'll do 31 here. Now holding on to with your fingers, you're going to bring this over. I have to push this back a little bit so that I have a nice loop and my knitting needles meet. Now here, this is the hardest part of Mobius knitting, is the cast on. Once you got that done, everything else is a breeze. So you see here we have the yarn over the cable and the needles. And this is where the twist occurs. So here's the needle and the cable. They run side by side. And there's a twist where the cables will turn once. And that's how it should be. Yeah. Can you see this? Here's the cable following along the needle. And right here is where it crosses over. And we just want to make sure there's only one twist in there. But that's it. And this yarn right here, this piece, the string, is the beginning of the row. Now, Cat Bordhi says in her videos that you need to have a stitch marker. And for years, I used the stitch marker, but I don't anymore because this right here is my stitch marker. When this is facing me in the front of my work, I have completed one row. Now, this is where you want to make a tight stitch right here, because otherwise you get a hole. So you want to hold this really tight and just make a knit stitch, go into the hole of this one, this stitch. Don't worry, this all gets straightened out here. It looks more complicated than what it is. Okay, so I made a stitch here. Oops. Stay on there. Let me do this, redo this. This was confusing. So here we are. Here's the beginning. I go into the first stitch. You have to hold on to this string here. And this is where I want to pull tight. So I don't have now you don't just, the stitch here consists of two parts. The yarn that is over the needle and the yarn that's under the needle. So each one gets knitted off just with a knit stitch. Again, this right here needs to be tight. And then you knit the stitches off as they come. This one's in front of the needle. This next one is behind the needle. Front, behind. In front, behind. You keep knitting. Now you can kind of see why a certain needle length is important. It can't be too tight, too short, or too long. But of course, if you make a long, a really wide Mobius wrap that goes over the shoulders, then you need a long needle. So I'm just moving these stitches along, and if they seem a little bit off, that's no worries. That will all work out as they're knitted. Because here it seems like they should be really loose, but they're not. So just knit them off as they come, as they appear. Sometimes they cross over and you have to straighten it out a little bit. Like, who's next in line here? Right here. We will be at the halfway point soon. See, this is a good example right here. They're a little bunched up, but if I move them back, then we can see clearly. Just knit as they appear. This one is over the needle. This next one is behind the needle. And moving these stitches around. This is really exciting because as you knit, you can see the scarf growing from the middle out. And it literally comes off the needles with the twist. It's a Mobius twist, named after a German mathematician who demonstrated this Mobius loop. And I'll put a link to that, to a video about that. Okay, now we're almost at the end here, or at the beginning. Well, it has no beginning and no end, so okay. Here, there's another trick here I use to make sure that there's no hole in the middle. So I'm taking this last stitch back off this needle, and what I'm going to do is knit those two together. That will give me a tighter connection right here. So when I cast on, I do this with this in mind, that I will knit those two together. I did 31 in this one, but it doesn't really matter. So now this thread is behind the needle, behind the cord, so that is halfway through. And now I begin to knit a pattern. For many, many years, I did my Mobiuses with just several rows of knit and then several rows of purl stitches. Well, no, actually, I'm going to do that to demonstrate that I'm going to just knit here because that's important. Forget that other pattern, I'll show that later. I'll keep going on with knit stitches for the sake of the tutorial. This is a single split. We're splitting hairs here. Okay. I'll just keep knitting until I'm to the place where my yarn here is in the front. Knit, knit. And as you can see, I do continental knitting, where I hold the thread, the yarn in my left hand, and with my fingers, I just push the stitches toward the needle and to move them around. And pretty soon you will be able to see where that twist is and what happens, the magic that happens, because all of the knit stitches that I'm knitting will appear on the cable below as purl stitches. knit, knit. Tension needs to be comfortable. I don't knit real super loose, but you don't want this to be too tight either. Okay, we're almost to the place where our yarn is in the front, the tail, where the tail is in the front. Okay. So we finished the first entire loop, the first loop. Okay, this tail is important. It will be used later to weave in, and if there is a little bit of a looseness or a gap, then you can use that tail to tighten that up. But you can see why this is very important in the beginning to hold this tight. I'm just going to keep on knitting here. And you can see I've done a fairly good job, and this is pretty close. The stitches are pretty close together. So yarn tail in the front is your point of reference. When you have come back here, you have finished one row. And this cast on, it's just a matter of practice. You do it many, many times, then you can do it in your sleep, and it's super easy. So I'll keep knitting, and going to speed this part of the video up, probably because I'm just doing the same thing. Just what's important here is that you keep this just running around here. And well, let me see. If I lay this down, you can see, can you see here's the tail. And can you see where the crossing over is? It's right here where it crosses over. Okay, I have a Mobius on my needles over here. I've done quite a bit of knitting already, and I'm just going to bring that over here to show. See how this looks on the needles? It's literally twisted, and the cable and the needles, here's the cable, and the needles will separate more and more as the Mobius scarf grows. You will have the cable underneath and the needles up here, and you'll knit around with the twist in it. And that's how it comes off the needles. That's why it's so great. There's a seamless twist. So this one here, made with a similar variegated yarn. There's the twist. And I can go around and around. There's no inside, no outside. And the reason why you don't see the purl stitches as knit on one side, it's because of this pattern. I do knit one, purl one, and alternate it. It drapes good, and it doesn't bunch up with the other technique. I'm going to, okay, that I'm going to show you. Okay, we resume recording. And here is a Mobius, a short one, where I alternated knit and purl. And what I knit on top appears as, or what I knit here on this side appears as purl on the other side. What you knit on top appears as purl stitches on the bottom. What you purl on top appears as knit stitches on the bottom. So it's easier to see with this technique, but do you see that they bunch, the whole scarf bunches up together. And with this pattern, with this knit one, purl one all throughout, I have a less bunched up fabric. So this is the way I'm doing it now. But for the sake of demonstrating what happens, and you can already see, okay, the knit here and the purl on the bottom. So all I'm doing is knitting, and yet I see purl stitches on the bottom. That's the magical side, the magic of the Mobius loop. And if you turn it around, it's the same on the other side. There's knit stitches here and purl stitches here. And I always know where I am, and that's why I don't use a stitch marker, because I have learned that my cast-on tail is my reliable reference point. A stitch marker can fall off, but this tail will always be in its place. I will also show you the several different ways that the Mobius scarf can be worn, because there's more than one way. And because of the twist in it, it drapes really nicely around your neck. And you don't have to, you can wear a scarf and you don't have to have the ends hanging off and getting into the way or coming loose. I wear Mobius scarves throughout the cold season, in the house all day long. When my neck is warm, my whole body is warmer. And it just feels cozy and comfortable. Try to use yarn that is not itchy. So if I can't really use wool or fibers that would lay against my skin that are itchy. Okay, here we go. Here is the tail on the back side. Let me see if you can see this. The tail is on the back side. So I am halfway through. So it seems like when you're casting on 30 stitches, you might think, how can that be enough to go around my neck? But you have to really double it, because each stitch has two parts, and in the end, it's doubled. So okay, this is just fun to see this grow and to see what happens. And I think it's really because of the cast on that more people are knitting Mobius scarves. But once you master it, it becomes so easy. It's really just a matter of muscle memory. You can already see how the cable and the needle is separated. You can see the knit stitches on top and the purl stitches on the bottom. And every time I come to the place where the cast-on tail is in front, I have completed a row. And if I do yarn changes, like as in this one, where I used a couple different yarns, it's hard to see on the camera. I will tie the new end on in that place where the cast-on tail is in the front, that the beginning of the row. But that's just my preference. You don't have to do that. You can start a new color or a new yarn anywhere. I'm almost there to the beginning. Okay. And you can see there's a little bit more of a gap here. I should have been even more careful, but usually I manage, but demonstrating this on a video and talking and concentrating on my work all at the same time, well, you get the idea. And now let's see the twist again. It's right here where the cables cross over. So I'm going to grab this one here and continue to knit on this here, showing a little bit more of how. So what happens here is I knit the purl stitches and purl the knit stitches. And I'm using, the way I purl these is I have the yarn in front, the working yarn. I go with my needle behind, underneath this yarn into the stitch, and then I just lip it through the stitch this way. And the purl stitches appear like this on the needle, where you have to go into the back to knit. But it's easier. I could purl another way, like this way, and the stitch appears, but in the circular knitting, I found this the easiest way, the most efficient way. Again, to purl, yarn is in the front of the needle. This needle goes underneath this yarn into the stitch, and then you just grab it and pull it through the stitch. Knit, purl, knit. And when I first cast on and I have maybe a stitch too many where it doesn't alternate, I just knit two together so the pattern can be seamless. I can literally knit, purl all the way around and keep going until this Mobius is finished. I got this yarn from Michael's, and it's not variegated. It just has different colors. And I just like the way this turns out, because in the end, when the Mobius is finished, you have this color band going around it. Well, I'm wearing one. Let me take this off and show this one. I used 3 different yarns in this, but it's just nice where you can see where the color bands cross over. Well, I don't know if I'm making sense. And here we have only 2 colors, so maybe it's even more clearer. Okay. Okay, let's talk about bind off. We want a stretchy bind off. Stretchy bind off is important. There are several different ways to bind off. And it's just important that there's some give and stretch in that, because you're stretching this over your neck, over your head. And what I do is I crochet the bind off. So I'll make put a segment at the end of the video for that part. But you can look on YouTube. There are many, many different ways of doing a stretchy bind off. If you are not comfortable using a crochet hook, you can do it with the knitting needles. There are so many different ways. And I have used different methods over the years, but actually found that, I am a crocheter also, that crocheting the last row off is the easiest way, and it guarantees a stretchy bind off. And it leaves a nice clean, leaves a clean edge. This isn't quite ready yet. I have to do a little bit more knitting before I can bind this off. So I've been knitting a few rounds, and now I'm going to cast off. And as you can see by my tail here, cast on tail, I'm at the end of the row, or at the beginning of the new one. So I'm going to pull on this to get it out of the way, this needle, and we'll just take a crochet hook. I've got a F5 or a 3.75 millimeter. And I'm just gonna go into the loop and crochet them off fairly loosely, but not too loose. Just so it gets a nice edge here. You can see the edge, and it's stretchy. So I'm going to finish this. So I'm close to the end here, and I didn't calculate correctly and got into the next color a little bit, but that's okay. I'm not worried about it. I have just a few stitches left on my needle. Did I say cast off earlier? I meant bind off. You cast on and bind off. It's silly. Silly me. Okay, last stitch. And then I'm going to pull the needle out and make one more crochet stitch, trying to get in here where I can close up any loops. I just made a slip stitch. And I'm gonna cut the yarn and leave enough, oops, to weave in the ends. And that's all that's left to do is weave in the ends here and here. And this Mobius is finished. Usually, so some I make narrower, smaller, because sometimes I just like a more decorative neck piece and not wear it so much for warmth as, yeah, a little bit of an accent piece. And I also like to make wider ones that I'll show you what you can do with those. It's pretty exciting. But I have a few more in this yarn. This is very soft. As I said before, I use mostly acrylic yarns because I don't want anything itchy on my neck. I can't stand anything scratchy on my neck. So, but you can experiment and see with different fibers, with different yarns, what you like. Okay, I also knitted a few more rows on this one. And here you can clearly see the purl stitches here on top appear as knit stitches here. And the knit stitches here appear as purl. And you can continue in this way of just alternating a few rows, but it does bunch together more. So naturally, it just does that. Let's see. Okay. This is all about knitting, casting on, binding off. And as I said, you can find different ways of binding off with knitting needles that's still stretchy. So that's it for this video. I'm going to make another one in which I will demonstrate how to wear a Mobius and what else you can do with it. So that's all for now. Thank you for watching.